I'm in the Department of Political Science here at Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador. I wanted to start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. So as a white settler, I'm particularly reflective of what it means to be here on this land, in this place with you today. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you, and thank you all for attending. I look forward to learning with you today, and I'm most grateful that you've decided to share this time with me. So there's three objectives to this webinar. The first one, these are all around teaching learning. And I think it's really important, I may say learning teaching or teaching learning. These are obviously woven together. And as such, I might be leading this seminar or at the moment talking in this seminar. But actually, we're all teachers and learners here. So I'm looking forward to your participation. So there are three teaching learning objectives. Number one, to reflect on grading. Number two, to engage with labor-based grading. And number three, again, around learning and teaching. We're all learners and we're all teachers here. So what does the schedule look like for the next hour or so? You've got a little bit of a sense about who I am. And next, I'd like you folks to start introducing yourselves in the chat so I can get a sense of who you are and you can introduce yourselves to each other. So maybe where you're located, what your interest is, and thinking about who you are and maybe what you're grateful for today. Then I'm going to again turn to you and ask you the question, why do you grade students? I think it's a really important question. And when I started to think about it, it really changed a lot about how I work. And then I'm going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of what is labor-based grading, why I love labor-based grading is also called contract grading or specification grading or spec grading. I'm going to give you some examples of how I've integrated it into my courses and open it up for any kind of comments or questions about how that goes. And then I'm going to talk about why I love it, my experiences with it. I'm going to talk about what was unlovable about some of my experiences. And then I'm going to open it up to questions and discussion. I'm hoping this will be sort of half an hour or so of me talking and engaging with you all. And then I'm hoping to open it up. And if we finish early, great. If we have a lengthy conversation for the next 30 minutes or up until 3 o'clock Newfoundland and Labrador time, that's fine with me too. Okay. So maybe, yeah, okay. So around introductions, I was sort of wondering about who you all are and what you might be, who you are, what your interest is on grading or in specifically labor-based grading. And I also wanted to talk about gratitude, how I came to this. So I'm grateful for, this is such a short list, but I wanted to talk a bit about who I'm grateful for and what I'm grateful for. First off, Max Libero has been a huge inspiration, and we've talked a bit back and forth about our different teaching techniques, and I've learned so much from them. Sharon Loricella, I've also learned quite a bit from them, specifically Do not assign assignments that you do not want to mark, right? Don't put yourself into grading jail. Assign assignments you love to mark. I'm grateful for my colleagues here at the university, and I'm grateful to all the learners and teachers at the university. And what do I mean by learners and teachers at the university? Of course, that includes other instructors. It also includes staff. It includes the facilities crew, the maintenance people, the people who keep the electricity going, the IT people, the food service workers who serve us. So I'm grateful for all the teachers and learners that are all around us and help maintain and support us through our work. Farther afield, primarily through Twitter, honestly, although also through some scholarly work. I'm grateful for Megan von Bergen, Jesse Strommel, Aseo B. Inua, Sarah Ahmed Bell Hooks, and Jessica Calarco, who have all learned about pedagogy and also teaching. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because, no, actually, I'll leave my screen on for the next 2 to 3 minutes. I'm just going to take a look at the time here. And I'd like you all to write down, not in the chat yet, but I'd like you all to write down, take 2 or 3 minutes to write down your initial reflections on why you grade. Why do we grade? Or why do you specifically grade? So it's 2:09 by my clock, and I'd like you just to write down on a piece of paper or on your laptop or whatever, what are some of the reasons why you grade? And I'll give you a couple 3 minutes for that. Okay, if you have a sense of why you grade, perhaps, I'm just going to expand my screen here. I've been on sabbatical, so I'm kind of rusty with the old WebEx, so forgive my rustiness here. Okay, great. So if you need more, I'm going to assume you don't need more time. So if you want to share it in the chat, as Keith has, I appreciate your enthusiasm, Keith. That's fine. Or if you want to come on camera or just use your voice to share with us about why you grade. I'd love to hear from a number of people on this. Would anybody be willing to come on? Okay, Julie?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
okay, let's go with Julie and then to you, Carolyn. Oh, and then to somebody else who I don't see the name. Oh yeah, please, Julie.
Hi, it's Sarah. Thanks so much. When you asked this question first, my first thought was, I don't know, why do I grade? I feel there is a certain expectation. So I teach in the business program at Grenfell campus, just to give you some context, but there is an expectation that we will award grades as professors and that students also want their grades to build a higher GPA or an average, or so there's that piece. But I also struggle with how else do we distinguish the students who pass versus those who don't pass? And our university system is not really set up well to do anything other than assign a numerical grade, or, in recent years, this pass fail. So those are some of the first thoughts that I had, but thank you for asking the question and making me think.
Yeah, I really like those answers. Thank you so much, Julie. And thanks for being the first. I really appreciate that. Carolyn, please.
Hi there. Thank you, Sarah. I think my first answer really meshes with what was just said. And that was because I have to, right? And I have to because of the way the system is set up. But then I quickly figured actually more than I thought, more reasons than I thought I would have to grade. But I'll leave it at that to give other people a chance to speak. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else want to kind of jump in here? I think it's so interesting.
Hi, Sarah. This is Connie Morrison here.
Hey, Connie.
Hi, I just left a little note in the chat just to say I think we're all on the same page. We grade because our students expect us to, and the institutions where we work expect us to, and I think a lot about this institutionalized credentialing, what it really means. What does it mean to be an A student? What does it mean to be a B student? What does it matter? Anyway, so I think we'll get to all of these things, and then do the grades we assign really reflect deeper, meaningful learning? And I think that's, again, maybe where we're going.
Great. Thank you, Connie. I see a number of comments in the chat as well. So I'm just going to read out a few of them. I guess to fill in the silence, I feel compelled to do that. But if anybody else wants to jump in, please. Erica says, I grade because I have to. I wouldn't otherwise. I want to read Keith's. Keith says to objectively measure understanding and performance. Stacy says, it's an introduction. Amy, so I can see if students learned certain content, if they have improved in skill, if they've contributed to activities, and so students can identify areas for improvement. I grade, Jeanette says, I grade because I have to give students a mark at the end of the term. So there's lots of variance there, I think, and obviously some overlap, which is interesting. Some are saying that there's something quite instrumental and helpful about that, around sort of this idea that there's a marker, and there's as Keith says, sort of like some kind of objective measure. Others, like Connie, have said that it's kind of about the institution. Now, I think there's, I should be really clear here. I think it's really important that there's a whole bunch of different pedagogies in the university. We have a whole bunch of different students. Not every pedagogy is going to marry with each student. And so this is how I think about it. I'm not expecting other people to think about this, but this has been really emancipatory for me. Carol Lynn, did you want to jump in there?
Sorry, I just wanted to add something that I think relates to everything that's been said, but it hasn't quite been articulated this way. The last thing on my list was to assess my teaching, right?
Right.
Because if I get a sense of what people are understanding and what they're not understanding, I think it usually says something about how I'm conveying the information. So
Yeah, I think that's really, I think that's really important. Carolyn, I'm really glad you mentioned that because I remember when I was an undergraduate and a professor said how humbling it was when they were marking a midterm or a final and they realized what they thought they taught in the course was completely different from what the students took away. So I do think there is an iterative, an important iterative process there. Uh, yeah, I think that's really important. So there's lots of different reasons why we grade. So I, I'm kind of in Connie's camp. I grade because I have to. And so maybe I should be really clear about what the grade means. The institution expects me to present, and the students expect me to present a particular kind of grade. And there's different ways to do that. I'll talk specifically about how the labor-based grading works. But the labor-based grading, I give 1 mark at the end, and that's when my teaching sort of meets the institution, right? So I have to, and the students expect that as well. But I'm a teacher. I really take that part of my job very seriously. I'm a teacher and I have responsibility to all the students. And what students take from a course can be wildly different than what my expectations are. So I really aim to meet the students where they are. And so my ideas about what they need to learn or what they should learn sometimes are not commensurable with where they are or what they can do. And yet I feel a deep responsibility to all the students. I think anyone who's in the university who's teaching right now did very well in school. I remember giving out grades early on when I began teaching and feeling so bad if I gave someone a C. And then I realized students were quite happy with that. So my expectations and student expectations often, I learned a lot. Let's say I learned a lot about what students' expectations were. Okay, so let's, often when I'm in these seminars, I'm like, okay, let's get to it. What is labor-based grading? What are you talking about? So let's get to it. I'm going to start sharing my screen again. Okay, so what is labor-based grading? So it seeks to move the focus away from grades and towards intrinsic learning. Labor-based grading assigns letter grades to students based on the amount of labor they perform to complete a series of well-defined reading and writing tasks. So it was a system developed by critical scholars of English writing initially, and it's part of a suite of critical alternative pedagogy practices that seek to move this focus away from grades and towards learning. So it began in university level English classes, English writing classes specifically, to create more equitable outcomes for students, especially those from non-traditional backgrounds. It is also intended to offer students better support in developing skills in academic writing and critical thinking. So that's from Gibson et al. I have a bibliography at the end with all the citations. So it assigns a letter grade based on the amount of work. So of course, there's different approaches to pedagogy and evaluation. Ungrading and labor-based coursework has different underlying pedagogy and logic than what I think we would call conventional coursework. Okay, what is conventional coursework? Like when I first started teaching a second year introductory course, it was 2 exams and a paper, right? It's very straightforward, conventional. So grading has its own, but in the almost 8 years that I've been doing this, and I know there's many people in the audience who've been doing this much longer than me. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from you. But what I've learned is that grading has its own relatively recent history, okay? So the bell curve, something we are all inculcated in, seems to, in appearance, reflect a merit-based logic, but in fact, it really has a more odious history. And so when I think about grading, I think about a certain kind of evaluation that is, because grading has such a recent history, it really is a political act. I would call it a political act. And what I'm interested in is not grading, I'm interested in teaching and learning. Where I think things like grading and that specific kind of evaluation might be helpful is not as our job as teachers, but rather as our jobs as researchers and peer reviewers. Now, I'm not talking so much about graduate students, that's another level. But some students come to the universities with the skills to write beautifully, to write excellent papers, or tackle challenging exams. And those students will always get A's. But what I learned is that that might not actually show improvement, or that they're learning new things and skills. Others may show immense improvement, work incredibly hard, work very hard, and move their quality of work from what we might consider an F to an A. But they're still graded at the C level at the end of the term, because grading does not necessarily reflect, at least in the way I was initially teaching, does not reflect students' learning. So as a teacher, my responsibility is to all students, whether they're quote unquote D students or A students, and the labor-based approach works for me. And I just really want to reiterate, I don't care that much about upholding a grading standard because I don't think it serves teaching. I don't think it serves teaching, at least the way I was practicing it. So let's face it, this is what I write on the syllabus to my courses where I use labor-based grading. Let's face it, grading and receiving grades is a weird way to engage with learning. And in fact, there's evidence that grading is actually demotivating. As such, I designed this course to use specification grading, sometimes known as contract grading or labor-based grading. And with this kind of grading, you, the student, are in control. You determine how much work you would like to complete based on, and I'll get to this, bundles. If you complete the work to a satisfactory level, you will get the grade. I will support your work, whether you choose a C bundle or an A bundle. My responsibility is the same. And then to the student, what is your responsibility? You will agree to pursue a specific bundle at the start of the term and declare your intention through your first journal. At the midterm, instead of an exam, you will evaluate and review your own work. You will provide a written reflection of your learning progress and assignments. As part of the reflection and self-evaluation, you can change your bundle at the midterm or make it the same. And for all the assignments that I give, all of them get one of 3 evaluations. They get satisfactory, revise, or unsatisfactory. And I give feedback on all of the assignments. I'll talk a bit more about that. I'll talk a bit more about evaluation and feedback when I get to the bundles. So why do I love labor-based grading? It unsettles grades. I think one of the most important aspects of labor-based grading is to explain how grades work, sometimes explain about the history of grading and how it includes certain people and excludes other people, and how grades don't necessarily work. On the feedback, I give feedback to the assignments have very particular requirements that the students have to meet. And I give very specific feedback to each assignment. On D2L, which is the system we use here at the university, I use the audio recording, so it's very fast. And the one thing that is really interesting to me, and the recording also provides a transcript as well, so it's very accessible, is as opposed to saying, is this a B plus or 40 out of 50 or these kinds of things, I'm like, okay, I get to go into problem solving mode. How can this person meet the assignment requirements? And so improving citation skills, building a specific paragraph with the proper structure, these kinds of very specific. So if they get it unsatisfactory, they can move it into satisfactory. Revision is encouraged, so the assignments are not one and done. So their focus is on teaching, learning, and practice. One issue is that the students also engage with what unsatisfactory is. And so it doesn't become something like an F. It's not a grade that's an F, but it's an opportunity to practice again. Often there's an initial kind of resistance and anxiety that happens with unsatisfactory. Because of this grading standard, it's seen as being a failure, as opposed to the iteration that is involved with feedback, and I would say caring feedback. And the specifics, right? The labor-based aspect of this. The assignments are carefully connected to the objectives of the course, which are laid out at the beginning. Okay, so what does this actually look like in practice? So I teach in political science. This is an example of third-year bundles. Because of resistance from the institution, I've moved this 90 down more recently. There's been some friction from administration with, there's a certain sort of expectation about what grades should be. So that 90 has been moved down, but people have a choice at the beginning of the term to choose how much work they want to do. And then at midterm, they can renegotiate that if they're having illness, or if they're doing really well, they can move to a different bundle. So to get an A, you have to do a great deal of work. To do a B, you have to do a middling amount of work. To do a C, you have to do a fair amount of work. One thing that's really important that I lay out at the beginning is that you can't just pass. The level of quality that I'm expecting in this course to get a satisfactory is at minimum a C plus, but it really is a B minus to a B plus is what I'm looking for to gain satisfactory. So this is not people just getting by. This is people doing good quality work. It's just the level of how much work people do is a little bit different. You'll see in this bundle that revision is a key part of the assignment. And the big part of this is that people have choice. So I'm going to, I saw that there's a couple of comments. I don't want to miss things if I'm missing stuff. It seems, okay. Does anybody, I'm going to move to another bundle, which is very similar. Does anybody have any comments or questions about the bundles? Okay, so I see a couple comments here. Yeah, Amanda, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I was eating my lunch, so I wanted to be off camera. My question is about the bundles and the pushback that you got. So I was asking in the chat if you moved it from a 90 to what? I'm wondering what it got moved to. And I'm wondering, yeah, so the oversight from administration about what the grades should be, what those standards are, and what our expectations are of that, and how to deal with those kinds of, I don't know. I have a loosey-goosey question, obviously. Thank you.
So, I got pushback from head of department on having too many A's, right? And so if the A's were like 81, 82, and maybe I should say that on the grading, that final grade, it's not, I also state in the syllabus that you can move it up half a grade or down half a grade, right? So if people do like 90% of the B work, I might move it down to a C plus or something like that. So that's a little bit malleable. But I only have to do that once a term. So that's a gift for me. And so then the other kind of pushback I got is that you have too many high, the marks are too high. And I said, too bad. I mean, but I also know I have also a colleague who got a lot of pushback. And because there's a certain kind of standard in our department that is important, some people feel it's important to police that standard. So I don't know what to sort of say about that. Yeah, thanks for the question. Erica, go ahead. You're muted.
Sorry, my microphone was off. In addition to the question asked in the chat, I just want to make a comment about this pushback against high grades. I
Yeah.
end up with mostly A's, and I write something to the head explaining why. And if this is maybe a topic for another conversation, but if people are interested, maybe we could all get together and chat about strategies that we've used to push back against that. Because
Yeah.
like you said, what is the problem with them, having demonstrated mastery? So that's kind of the argument I take.
Yeah, so I think that's really important. And I wanted to address your comment about unsatisfactory. Yes, unsatisfactory can revise. And then I'll get to Julie's question as well. Yeah, I think grades are bullshit. I really do. And so I feel very comfortable with this. Now, that's not to say I don't have standards in some particular way. But I also think my job is not to be a police officer. My job is to be a teacher. And so even though I have successfully navigated universities enough to get a job, I know how the system works. I know how to navigate it, but I also know this system really keeps out a lot of people and doesn't serve everybody. And so I think the system does a better job at that. And so I have to relearn all the time, not to be a police officer around this stuff. Try to teach myself that way, or remind myself, I guess. And so to Julie's point, what about students who are doing no work or entirely unacceptable level of work? So on the smaller classes, the largest class I have is like 60 to 80 students. And if they aren't doing the work, they haven't fulfilled the contract, or they haven't, like, this is based on work. So that's that's the easy part of it. The other part is the entirely unacceptable is Julie's question about what about students who are doing no work or entirely unacceptable? If it's unacceptable, it's unacceptable. So one of the things about the spec gradings or the labor-based did the different names, is the assignment says you have to cite properly. You have to have a proper bibliography. I'm thinking about something very, very concrete. It has to be polished and well written. And so part of it is having low stakes assignments that can get through with or revised on a regular basis. And if they're not doing work, they're not doing the work. But it has to be, I think if it's entirely unacceptable, then it's important to have actually a talk. And so one of the reasons I said, I have on the smaller 3rd and 4th year classes, I have midterm meetings with all the students face to face or online, and have clear talks about what's going on. And because the specifications are quite clear, I can say, you said you were going to do this, you didn't do this. So it's not about students not having kind of a sense of responsibility. It's actually, they have a huge responsibility here. And it frees me up in a way, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Okay, I'm going too long here. I thought we'd be more into conversation, but let's, okay. What else? Sorry, I don't think I understand what's the difference between revise and unsatisfactory. If anybody gets an unsatisfactory, it's after X number of revisions. If the work is wholly unsatisfactory, then they get an unsatisfactory, but they always have a chance to revise. So at a certain point, there's not enough time. So it's not there is an end point, right? So please put the chat back in if I've missed something. So Paul, Sarah, eventually those who want an A and can't do the work settle into another grade. Yes, right? So at the midpoint, when you have that revision, they have to decide at midpoint if they're going to still go for the A or change if they aren't making it, right? So they have a chance to change midterm. And because I have built-in assignments of this is where you're starting, you're going to tell me where you're starting. Midterm, they have to do a report about where they are at, and end of term, they have to say how they fulfilled the bundle. They're reflecting on their work throughout the term. So they have to take responsibility. And yes, 160 students would be really tough to do this. And so then thank you so much for saying that, because then it gets back to the only reason we can have classes that are 160 students is because we grade. Like it works together, right? Then we have the 2 exams and 1 short paper sort of thing, or we just have exams that are easy to grade because it's the only way to deal with that. Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
So I don't know how long you've been doing this, but I'm curious, if you could give us a rough estimate of how many students do choose the A bundle, the B bundle, the C bundle, and, in general, do they meet their requirements? Yeah.
So I've been doing this since the pandemic, and so things are weird, right? And so our expectations of students, so that's one aspect of it. So I don't have I don't have the statistics, but in general, what happens is when I first started to introduce it, not everybody, a large number of people went for an A, and it became an aspiration as opposed to like a real recognition of the time they could actually put into the course. And so that's why that midterm check-in is so important, because you can say, look, you should be doing about 50% of the work by now, and you've only put in 1 assignment. You need to rejig this. So the responsibility goes back to the students to make sure that they're doing what they said they would do, as opposed to me obviously supporting them, but not being the police officer. Yeah. Amy, yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I just had two questions, if that's okay, but they're relatively short. I had posted in the chat, like I deal with a lot of students who intend to go on to professional schools, especially med school. And so they're really depending on getting the highest grade they can because they need it for competition purposes.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you've had any complaints from students because they can't get above the 90 or above whatever it's set at now. And I was also wondering, well, actually, I guess I'll let you answer that first.
Yeah, so in political science, a 90 is really high. And I've moved it down to sort of 85, but no, I haven't gotten any pushback. But what I do see, and this is something I've started to build in with the more experience, is the people who literally can do the A work are the keeners. And I've started to give them more responsibility. So for example, on discussion boards, they have to take a leadership position. So their labor really is about, and this is a whole nother aspect of it, is building a collegial feeling, but they have more responsibility to reach out to their peers and take on more responsibility. So to answer your question quickly, without the comment, I have not had pushback, but I'm thinking I probably have a different cohort than you do.
Yeah, that people might need to adapt their marks based on the cohorts. A second quick follow-up is the, kind of whether or not a student can do a certain bundle seems to depend a lot on their time management skills. I'm wondering if you offer any instruction or resources and stuff around that. So if a student comes into the class, maybe they're a really good student, but they just are really have poor time management skills and end up being in a later bundle because they keep procrastinating or putting stuff off or something.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I've never thought about that. I mean, they have deadlines, like I have windows of time when they are that they should be getting assignments in. So, through the syllabus, it's kind of mapped out for folks. But no, I don't teach time management skills. Yeah. So Carolyn has asked, does this save me time? Okay, so this is one of the best parts of it. The assignments I give and the way I offer feedback now, I enjoy my work. So it's not necessarily that it saves time, but the work I do is so much more enjoyable because it's really about watching students move through their work in a way that they take on responsibilities. The students who are C students just do the work. I'm still there for them. I give them as much time as obviously any other student, but they don't have the same kind of pressures. But for me, it's pleasurable as opposed to a drag. So that's the big thing for me, is I like doing it. Okay, I will have an assignment. I'll have a handout that folks can pull into, but this is my second year bundles. And then, okay, so what I love about this, and so I've sort of touched on this already. And Carolyn segued into this perfectly. Time. My time is way, way more enjoyable the time I do spend. There's and the way I structure the assignments is I don't have the same kind of heaviness at certain times of the year or the term. So time-wise, I would say it's about the same. It might even be less. Like I said, it's fun. Creativity. One of the things I really like about this is opposed to specific kind of grading with the assignments that I'm doing is when I give feedback, it's about problem solving. How can this student move this work forward? And so it's really, I have a lot of creativity in the sort of feedback I give now. It's not sort of strictured or constrained. And then the other thing is because, and this is a whole nother thing that I learned from Max Lieberall about building collegiality within the cohort. This is really about making connections with the students and really developing them as teachers, learners, and me as a learner teacher. So the connections are really not about, they're far richer, and it's far more interesting for me. When I first started to do this, I used points. This is what I did not love. It was a pain in the ass. And so I gave people a complete, huge list of different things they could do. And they could cobble together the points in order to get, and so an A would get X number of points, a B would get X number of points, a C would get X number of points. That was a pain in the ass. I would not recommend it. But I know other people have used that and have been super successful with it. And that's my bibliography. I'll share the PowerPoint with folks who want to. And yes, I'll set up a file and share it through CITL for all the resources I've shared here. Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Sorry, I just didn't put my hand down from before. Apologies.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Any other questions or concerns, puzzles, irritations?
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So I was just wondering what you would do in a situation of a student who had maybe selected an A bundle and were doing quite well, even up to that sort of midterm mark, but then between the midterm and the final, they maybe didn't submit, the appropriate level of work, and then, but maybe did submit something that would be adequate for a B or a C bundle. Would you drop that student down then at that final mark then? Yeah, okay.
I would. And because they're doing the self-evaluation, they would know that as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Like no surprises there.
Mm-hmm.
Jeanette, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Thanks. That was really quite interesting, Sarah. Thanks for sharing all that. I have two questions. One question, I'm starting to use some ungrading, so it's some of what you've said is quite similar to what I'm experiencing, but something I experienced with the students, and this relates to Sarah's question, I think, in the chat, relates to that initial anxiety about, I haven't gotten anything back yet. What is my grade going to be? So I'd like to hear how you've sort of dealt with that. And then also, what type of feedback have you got from students about this approach? Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. So that the 20%, right? Okay, so if you're at Memorial, you understand what that means. The student needs 20% of their grade by the midterm. Now, I suppose, so this is why the midterm reflection is super important. It's because people get to determine where they're at. So one way to do that is with the labor-based is that they have to do a certain amount of work. And the work does have deadlines before the midterm. So there's a sense that even though they wouldn't have, they should have completed 20% of the work, if that makes sense. And if they're on that trajectory, just as the same with grading, that should suffice. Does that make sense to people? I'd be really interested in hearing if that makes sense. Like there's specific deadlines? Yeah? Okay, great. So because of the self-evaluation, they should know where they're at. And then what's really interesting from the students is kind of an initial freak out, because it really is, it is different. it's different. And so the people who usually get most uncomfortable with it are the super high achieving students. Because they know how the system works, they know how to navigate it, and they're the ones who often feel unsettled by it. And in general, I've had, I would say, now I'm on sabbatical, so everything is through rose-colored glasses right now. But I would say it's been overall positive. I can't remember any kind of complaint. I think the biggest complaint, and this is a complaint we get anyways, is people don't understand, they don't read the syllabus, they don't understand it, that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of explanation, but that's why I see it as being so exciting, because when you're talking about grades and where they came from and how they started and the structural, this, you know, the structural racism that is built into them and sexism, and why some people can move through easily through university and other people there's frictions, then I think it's really exciting. So it does take, I spend one whole class explaining all of that, 1.5 actually. So I take lots of time to do that. Great questions. Thanks, Jeanette. Erica.
Yes, I was wondering in terms of the students that might be more disadvantaged, the ones that need more support, who maybe don't understand the system. What do you do? Because I know you had said you don't talk about time management things with them. Are you doing this with first year students, and what kind of supports do you provide them?
Yeah, great question. So I teach a second year class that a lot of first year students take. It's Introduction to Global Politics. And so in that class, I do a lot of really basic, this is how things work. This is how, what a library is. This is how referencing works, like that sort of stuff. I mean, the marginalized students know exactly what labor is because they all have jobs. So I haven't found any issue with sort of saying this is how it works with those students. I haven't seen that. But the more I teach, the more I take time to talk about how teaching works and what my expectations are, and how the university works. Because lots of students come in and don't know, and we have the assumptions that they do know. So I saw a couple, okay, so a big question, what's the difference between ungrading and labor-based grading? Labor-based grading, like, I'm not an expert in this by any stretch. There's lots of other people who are out there. My understanding is ungrading is a approach to pedagogy, and at its most pure, not a great word, but at its most pure, if the students give themselves a grade. So it's, and then there's a whole bunch of different sort of practices or approaches under ungrading. Okay, so Sarah said, Thorne says, my students were hesitant at first and I only used it for one assignment, but I did evaluations at the end and they loved it. Yeah, yeah, great. Martha, start with one question.
Hi. So I'm back in the composition classroom, first year English composition by distance
Okay.
this spring. And I'm terrified because I came face to face now with Chat GPT essays. And I'm loath to make them come in and do invigilated essays because that doesn't fit for me pedagogically, but I'm how do you apart from end products, how do you assess what amount of work, what quality of work they're doing.
How do I set, so it's all laid out at the beginning. And so it would be, something for you to think about in that situation. I mean, the whole chat GPT, that's a whole nother big conversation for sure. I've been sort of thinking about that is that bringing their own experience into it that chat GPT can't replicate is to really push, like really kind of say, what is your engagement with this text? Not what the text is, those kinds of things, so that you're really valuing the students for their contribution. But I would, people in chat are sort of starting out with one assignment, and that's what I would start doing is 1 or 2 assignments with this approach and see where it gets you. The other thing is I'm really, I'm aware we have 2 more minutes. So I just wanted to take this time to thank all of you for your contributions. Thank you all for coming. I'm really, really humbled by you all showing up, and I'm really humbled and grateful for the contributions that you offered to this to make it stronger and make it far more interesting than me just yapping at you. I'm going to make a bundle of resources up and I'll send it through CITL or something. Or you can email me and I'll send you a link to a file or something like that. I really want to thank you all for coming, and it's sunny here in St. John's, so wow, what a gift for you to be all here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.